You never noticed it when it started. No alarm bell rang when they said, "I can see us together in 10 years." In fact, it felt beautiful, safe even. They looked at you with eyes full of imaginary futures. They whispered stories of places you had never been, of children not yet born, of houses not yet built. They dreamed with you and you believed. That is how it begins. You were not stupid, you were not desperate, but you were human. And humans, when faced with the ache of loneliness or the craving for meaning, often fall hardest, not for what is real, but for what could be. What if I told you it was all a trap? The candlelit dreams, the promises of someday, the tear-filled confessions about how no one else understands me like you do. None of it was real, not to them, only to you, and that is the core of the wound. This manipulation tactic has a name. It is called future faking, and it is one of the most seductive forms of psychological control. It does not scream, it does not bruise, it does not shout in public. It whispers, it builds castles in your mind, then pulls you inside before it burns them down with you in it. You stayed because they kept promising a future. You waited because they said not yet, but soon. You sacrificed because you thought you were building something. But what you were really building was a prison made of your own dreams. There is a reason this tactic works. It hijacks the very part of your brain wired for survival, the need for security, predictability, connection. Your brain responds to hope as if it were oxygen. So when someone offers a vision of the life you secretly crave, your defenses fall, not because you are weak, but because hope is stronger than pain. Future faking is not just a romantic issue. It happens in workplaces, friendships, families. It shows up when a boss tells you, "Just stay loyal and we'll promote you next year." It emerges in politicians who stir the masses with "soon everything will change." It exists in promises, wrapped in charm, destined to collapse. But why? Why do people use this tactic? What is the psychology behind it? Is it always conscious? Are they monsters or just broken manipulators acting out their own traumas? More importantly, why do you keep falling for it again and again? You might think you are immune. You are smart. You read the books, watched the red flag videos, shared the quotes about knowing your worth. But somehow here you are, caught in another illusion. Again, and this time it hurts more, because you knew better. So let me ask you something. What if most of the people who hurt you never actually intended to love you? What if their only intention was to keep you? You see, manipulation tactics like future faking are not about making someone happy. They are about control, power, and emotional submission. When someone paints a false dream of the future and attaches your worth to it, they do not have to chain you. You will chain yourself with your own fantasies. And here's the most disturbing part. Many of them do not even know they are doing it. You might think it is about lies, but this trap, it runs deeper. It is about your dreams, weaponized against you, turned into chains, used to keep you still while they keep moving. So stay with me, because we are about to uncover something most people are too afraid to admit. A lie you may have told yourself, a dream you may still be clinging to, a wound so deep it disguises itself as love. What if everything you believed about your last relationship was a script written to keep you obedient? We are about to open that script, but not all at once. Piece by piece, word by word, I will show you the truth behind false dreams, the devastating power of future faking, and the dark psychology that manipulates not just your heart, but your very reality. You will not want to look away. You might never look at "I love you" the same way again. You grow up believing that when someone speaks of the future with you, it means something. When they talk about traveling together, building a life, making promises, it is supposed to be a sign of love. That is what you are taught, that the one who dreams with you must surely want to stay. This belief is not questioned. It is inherited, passed down in stories, in songs, in movies, that tell you love means planning something that lasts. And so you wait for it. You hope for it. You search for someone who speaks of forever. But what if the words were never meant to become real? What if they were a tool used to create emotional debt? What if future dreams in the wrong hands become a leash? In psychology, this tactic is subtle. It is not the lie that strikes. It is the illusion that binds. Future faking does not show up with threats. It shows up with comfort. It wraps itself in everything you want to hear. It gives you hope, not because it intends to fulfill it, but because it knows how much you need it. When someone uses this manipulation tactic, they are not investing in the future. They are buying time. They are stalling your doubts with dreams. They are silencing your boundaries with promises. And slowly, you stop asking questions. You stop noticing patterns. You stop trusting your instincts. This is not because you are blind. It is because the dream becomes louder than the discomfort. The vision of what might be overshadows the reality of what is. And that is how it spreads. Not through cruelty, but through confusion. The human mind is built to connect with narrative. When someone offers you a future, your mind begins to create the story. You picture yourself in it. You fill in the details. You believe the intention. But the manipulator only gave you the outline. You created the meaning. This is the part most people miss. You do not just fall for the manipulator. You fall for your own projection, your own need to believe, your own hunger to be chosen. And in doing so, you become part of the deception. There is a darkness here, one that psychology and philosophy both recognize. It is the darkness of self-betrayal. When you ignore reality to protect the fantasy, you are no longer being deceived. You are deceiving yourself. Future faking is not only about what someone says, it is about what you choose, not to question, what you allow, what you give in exchange for a dream that never arrives. In philosophy, this has been called the problem of the beautiful lie, a lie so comforting that truth becomes unbearable. The illusion feels safer than reality, and so you hold it close. Even as it begins to hurt you, there is no simple way to break free from this. It requires confrontation with them, with yourself, with the parts of you that needed those promises so badly that you tolerated the wait. You may have thought the waiting made you strong, that patience meant loyalty, that endurance meant love. But what if the waiting only kept you from seeing the truth? What if the most dangerous prison is not built from cruelty, but from kindness spoken without intention? This is where the unraveling begins. Before we go further, pause for a moment. Think of the last time someone told you what the future would look like. Ask yourself what changed and what never did. And if you are ready to see what lies beneath the surface, stay with me. We are about to look deeper into how future faking works. Not just the words, but the psychological design that holds it all together. You hear someone say it again. A trip, someday, a fresh start, once things calm down, a home, maybe in a year or two. It all sounds possible. It sounds warm. It sounds like love, but it is not. What you are hearing is not a plan. It is a mechanism, one that pulls you forward just enough, while never actually moving. It looks like vision, it feels like connection, but it is a trap made of promises that were never designed to come true. In psychological terms, this is known as future faking. It is a form of manipulation tactic used to create emotional dependency, not through fear or dominance, but through false hope. The person using it does not need to be physically forceful, they just need to be convincing. Future faking works because it appeals to one of the deepest human needs, the need to believe that tomorrow will be better, that someone sees a future with you, that what you are building has meaning. But the one using future faking is not building anything. They are buying time. They are securing control without offering commitment. They are stalling your doubts, not answering them. This tactic is common in patterns of narcissistic abuse. The person engaging in it often begins with intensity. They talk about growing old together, about naming your children, about where you will live. It creates an image that feels personal, exclusive, special. In reality, that image is often recycled. reused with others, or worse, used only to extract loyalty, obedience, or sacrifice. What makes future faking so effective is not just the words, it is the cycle. The manipulation is reinforced through intermittent rewards, a principle studied and proven in behavioral psychology. In his experiments, psychologist Burrhus Frederick Skinner demonstrated how irregular rewards given at unpredictable intervals produced the strongest behavioral responses in animals. When a subject never knows when the reward will come, it becomes obsessed. It waits. It tries again. It becomes emotionally bound to the cycle. That is exactly how future faking operates. You are given just enough to stay. A kind message, a small gesture, a glimpse of the dream. Then it is withdrawn, without explanation, without closure. And in that space of uncertainty, you hold on tighter, because maybe it is coming. Maybe they just need time. Maybe if you do better, love harder, wait longer, they will finally follow through. This pattern is not love, it is control. And the more sincere you are, the more effective it becomes. People who value commitment, meaning, and emotional depth are the most vulnerable, because you do not expect someone to lie with such softness. You expect manipulation to look harsher than this. But psychological manipulation is not always harsh. Sometimes it comes wrapped in future promises. It comes in conversations about vacations, weddings, houses, and growing old together. It comes in forms that look like care. What you must understand is that the person using this tactic is not necessarily aware of the harm. Some know exactly what they are doing. Others are acting out their own patterns, their own need for attention, admiration, or security. But the damage does not change. The harm is real. When the future is always tomorrow, you never live in today. And slowly, you forget what you were waiting for. You start to settle for the waiting itself. The manipulator never has to say goodbye. They only have to keep you looking ahead. And when the questions become too loud, when your doubts begin to rise, they answer with new promises, a new timeline, a new dream. Never with action, only with more vision. That is the structure of the setup. Not a lie told once, but a pattern repeated until you stop asking for more. But behind that pattern is something deeper, a psychological reaction that keeps you tethered, even when the truth becomes obvious. To see that clearly, you must understand why hope itself can become a form of bondage. Hope is not always a light. Sometimes it is a chain. You hold on to a future, not because it is certain, but because it gives you something to believe in. You tolerate disrespect, distance, and dishonesty, because the dream still feels alive, even when reality no longer supports it. This is not weakness, it is biology. The brain is wired to respond to reward. When someone offers you a beautiful vision of life together, your brain activates its reward system. The neurotransmitter dopamine is released, creating feelings of excitement, connection, and anticipation. But it is not the reward that binds you, it is the prediction of reward, the expectation that something better is coming. Psychologist Wolfram Schultz demonstrated this through studies on reward prediction error. He found that dopamine spikes, not when the reward is received, but when it is expected. When someone gives you a future to imagine, your brain experiences pleasure, even before anything happens. Now imagine that reward is delayed, cancelled, then promised again. That cycle becomes addictive. Hope becomes the drug. And like any drug, withdrawal is painful. This is why future faking works so well. It feeds your emotional system while bypassing your logical one. Even when the facts begin to conflict with the fantasy, your body still reacts to the dream. Add to this the concept of learned optimism, as developed by psychologist Martin Seligman. His research showed that people who develop a belief in positive outcomes tend to persevere, even when facing repeated failure. In relationships, this trait, when exploited, turns loyalty into suffering. The more you believe that things will improve, the longer you endure situations that are harmful. In manipulation, that belief is not encouraged for healing. It is used for containment. The person using future faking does not need to harm you directly. They simply need to offer you hope, then manage that hope through delay. Each time you start to question, they reset the reward. A small gesture, a vague apology, a new promise. You are never given resolution. You are given tension, and your brain becomes trapped in the cycle of almost there, almost ready, almost real. And because the high is intermittent, the emotional attachment deepens. This mirrors the concept of intermittent reinforcement, shown through the work of Frederick Skinner. When a reward is inconsistent, the subject becomes more engaged, not less. The uncertainty makes you crave stability, and that craving attaches itself to the source of the instability. This pattern causes what psychologists call trauma bonding, a psychological response where a person forms a strong emotional connection to someone who intermittently harms and soothes them. You begin to feel more connected, not less, to the one who keeps you emotionally unbalanced. The bond feels intense, powerful, even spiritual, but it is not love, it is addiction. And the longer the cycle continues, the more your identity wraps around the promise. You do not just want the future, you begin to need it, because it justifies everything you have already sacrificed. This is the cost of false dreams. They do not just waste your time, they reshape your mind. You stop seeing what is true. You start defending what might be, even when it hurts, even when it breaks you. Future faking traps you by taking something beautiful, then turning it into a weapon. It uses your own desire for connection to create compliance. It replaces reality with longing. It sells you an escape from loneliness, then locks the door behind you. And if you are not careful, you will not just lose time. You will lose your sense of what is real. But the truth does not stay buried forever. Eventually something shifts. A moment, a sentence, a silence that lingers too long. And in that space, the illusion begins to fracture. You wanted to believe, so you did. The words they spoke were vague. The details were missing. The timelines were always shifting. But you filled in the gaps. You painted in the color. You gave life to the dream. And without knowing it, you became part of your own deception. This is not about foolishness. It is about projection, a concept deeply rooted in both psychology and philosophy. When someone offers you a fragment of what you desire, your mind builds the rest. You imagine the meaning, you shape the intention, you assign goodness, when all they offered was convenience. Psychiatrist Carl Gustav Jung wrote extensively about projection. He explained that we often project our inner world onto others. We see not what is there, but what we long to see, especially in moments of hope, especially when we are vulnerable. In future faking, this projection becomes the key to the trap. The manipulator only needs to spark your imagination. You will do the rest. You will justify their silence. You will explain away their inconsistencies. You will tell yourself, they are trying. You think you are holding on to them, but you are holding on to your own projection. That is what makes this manipulation tactic so damaging. You are not just deceived by another. You participate in the illusion. You protect it. You fight for it. And when it begins to collapse, you do not just grieve the relationship. You grieve the version of yourself who believed it was real. This collapse is painful because it forces you to confront something most people avoid. The truth that your mind, in its effort to protect you, may have also betrayed you. Not out of cruelty, but out of fear. The fear of being alone, the fear of being wrong, the fear of facing life without the dream. Future faking thrives in this space. The manipulator gives less, while you give more. They do not need to maintain the illusion. You do it for them. Every time you say they are just stressed, every time you say the timing is just not right, every time you hold on to one good day and forget 10 bad ones. This is not love. This is survival disguised as loyalty. Philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre spoke about the agony of self-deception, of how people choose lies when the truth becomes unbearable. In the context of future faking, this becomes real. You know something is wrong, but you need it to be right, so you close your eyes, and the longer you keep them closed, the more lost you become. You may start to question yourself, your standards, your judgment. You may begin to ask if you expected too much, if you moved too fast, if you were too intense. That is the final stage of the trap. You stop trusting your own perception. You give that power to the one who promised the future. And once they have that power, they can shape your reality, not with force, but with silence, with half-truths, with carefully placed words that keep you dreaming. You become easy to manage because you are no longer reacting to what is happening. You are reacting to what you want to happen. That is projection, and it makes the manipulation almost invisible. But it is not invisible. You can see it if you are willing to look, if you are willing to ask the question you have avoided. What have you been pretending not to see? Ask it without rushing, without defending, without judgment. Just ask. Because if you are ready to see the truth, you must start with what you have helped create. And when you begin to see clearly, something else will rise to the surface. A darker question, one that does not ask how this happened, but who uses it and why they do. Not every promise comes from love. Some are spoken with intention, but not with honesty. They are given to gain, not to grow, to hold you, not to build with you. The ones who use future faking are not always easy to see. They may appear kind, they may speak with warmth. They often present themselves as thoughtful, attentive, and emotionally open. But underneath the surface is a pattern that repeats, a strategy that protects their position while keeping you unsure of your own. Psychological research often points to individuals who carry traits of narcissistic personality disorder, as well as those who operate from a mindset shaped by Machiavellian thinking. The behavior is not impulsive, it is measured. It is designed to pull you close, then hold you still, and through that stillness, they gain control without appearing to demand it. In this dynamic, their promises are not invitations, they are delays. The language they use is filled with possibility, but not with follow-through. They may speak of plans, growth, commitment, but the actions rarely arrive. When tension builds, they offer new visions. When doubt rises, they repeat what once gave you hope. This behavior is not limited to romantic relationships. You will see it in workplaces where leadership offers recognition or promotion, but only in the future, never now. You may hear it in friendships, where someone always plans to connect, always speaks of doing more, but never follows through. It appears in families too, a parent who promises consistency, but brings only more distance, a sibling who speaks of unity, but withdraws when it matters. These patterns persist because they are supported by your willingness to believe. Hope becomes the thread that ties you to someone who has no intention of weaving a real future with you. And once you are tied, even loosely, you hesitate to walk away. Philosopher Niccolò Machiavelli wrote of the power found in illusion. He believed that those in control do not need to be good, only to appear good, and so they learn the language of virtue without ever embodying it. In the world of emotional manipulation, the same principle applies. The manipulator does not need to be committed. They only need to sound committed. They only need to echo the things you long to hear. They do not take your freedom by force. They simply place a dream in front of you, and you follow it, not because you are weak, but because your desire for connection is real. This is where the power dynamic becomes visible. They speak the dream, you nurture it. They delay the future, you adjust your expectations. They remain passive, you become responsible for keeping the vision alive. In time, their silence begins to speak louder than their words. And yet, many still stay, not because they are fooled, but because they are invested. Leaving feels like failure. Giving up feels like losing something sacred. But what was sacred was never shared. It was yours alone. This is the cost of false dreams. Not just the time lost, but the part of you that believed those words had meaning. The part of you that shaped your choices around someone else's imagination. The ones who use future faking do not always do so out of cruelty. Some are unaware, some are afraid of confrontation, others are simply unwilling to face their own emptiness. But all of them act to protect their comfort, while leaving you exposed. Once this pattern becomes clear, something shifts inside you, not suddenly, not loudly, but slowly, like waking up in a room you no longer recognize. It is no longer about whether they meant it. It becomes about whether you can now see that they never planned to give it. The moment of realization does not always come as a storm. Sometimes it arrives in silence, a delayed reply, a plan that never happens, a promise you stop believing, even as it is spoken again. You feel the change before you can explain it. Something inside you becomes quiet, the excitement fades, the waiting begins to feel heavy, and one day you stop imagining the future they once described. You stop building it in your mind. This is the beginning of waking up. The truth of future faking is not just in what they said, it is in what never came. It is in what you gave, what you hoped, what you tolerated, while chasing something that was never real. Waking up feels disorienting. You remember the first time they said you were their future, the way it made your heart feel full. You remember the little things, the dreams you whispered late at night, the life you started to believe in. And now you see those memories through a different lens. They were not shared, they were performed. You feel sadness, not only for what they did, but for how deeply you believed. This is grief, but it is not grief for the loss of a person. It is grief for the loss of a dream you held with both hands, a dream that became part of your identity, a dream that made the pain feel worthwhile until it no longer did. In psychology, this shift is often described through cognitive dissonance, a mental discomfort that happens when your beliefs no longer match your experience. You believed they loved you, but they disappeared when you needed them most. You believed they were honest, but their actions told a different story. You believed the future was real, but it stayed just out of reach. To resolve this dissonance, the mind often clings to the original belief. It searches for proof. It replays the good moments. It ignores the gaps. But eventually, the weight of the contradiction becomes too much. You cannot keep defending what is hurting you. At this stage, many feel shame. They wonder how they did not see it sooner. They blame themselves for staying, for loving, for believing. But this shame is misplaced. It belongs to the one who gave promises without intention, not to the one who trusted them. Some experience symptoms similar to those found in trauma bonding. The emotional attachment becomes stronger in the face of intermittent reinforcement. The highs feel intense, the lows feel unbearable. But it is not intimacy. It is survival. The bond was not built on truth. It was built on need. You may also feel anger, not just toward them, but toward yourself. This is part of the healing process. It is the stage where the illusion begins to break. You no longer want to explain their behavior. You no longer want to wait for change. You want answers. You want clarity. You want to take back what you gave. As you begin to step away from the dream, the world looks different. You start to see the moments you ignored, the patterns you excused, the choices you made in the name of a future that was never real. This clarity does not come all at once. It unfolds in layers. It reveals what was hidden, not because it was far away, but because you were taught to look past it. The final part of waking up is acceptance. Accepting that what you believed was not true. Accepting that the person you trusted was playing a different game. Accepting that your hope was used against you. This is not the end of you. It is the beginning of something else. A return to your own voice, your own perception, your own time. When you stop waiting for them, you begin listening to yourself again. And that is when the path to healing opens. But healing does not mean forgetting. It means understanding how to protect your future from being stolen again. It means facing the truth with open eyes. It means becoming someone who no longer waits for the dream to come true. Escaping the cycle of future faking begins with identifying the pattern. This is not about confrontation or emotional release. It is about recognizing how the manipulation functions and how your behavior has been shaped around it. The pattern is built on delay, promises are given, follow-through is postponed. Just enough attention is offered to keep you involved, but not enough to establish anything consistent. Over time, you begin to adapt to the inconsistency. You wait longer, you lower expectations, you begin to see emotional neglect as part of the connection. Breaking this pattern starts by separating what has been said from what has been done. Emotional manipulation thrives on words. The words sound sincere, the words sound planned, but the actions do not follow. That gap between promise and behavior is where the tactic survives. In psychological terms, the process of recovery requires emotional validation. This means recognizing that your reactions are appropriate responses to prolonged uncertainty. When someone keeps you in a constant state of anticipation, it disrupts your ability to assess situations clearly. Your nervous system remains alert, waiting for resolution. That state is not sustainable. Restoring your inner authority requires boundaries. These are not rules for others. They are standards for yourself. A boundary defines what you are no longer willing to participate in. It removes you from the waiting room. If someone repeatedly avoids clarity, your boundary must not accommodate further delays. Setting boundaries is often difficult after long periods of emotional manipulation, especially when you have been conditioned to associate patience with strength. In the context of future faking, patience is often misused. The manipulator relies on it. It gives them time. It silences your questions. It delays accountability. This is where deeper psychological work becomes necessary. A process often referred to as shadow work involves identifying the parts of yourself that contributed to the cycle, not for blame, for understanding. Many people stay in manipulative dynamics because they are trying to protect themselves from abandonment, from failure, or from being alone. The manipulator exploits these internal fears. They offer just enough connection to keep you from leaving, and just enough confusion to keep you from seeing it. When those internal fears are addressed, your decisions change. You stop giving energy to relationships that offer no structure. You begin to observe behavior instead of listening only to words. You assess consistency. You question delays. You stop justifying emotional absence. Philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche wrote about the importance of accepting truth without avoidance. In practical terms, this means being willing to see a person for what they do, not what they say. When someone repeatedly makes you wait without taking meaningful action, their words are no longer relevant. This clarity often causes discomfort because it removes the hope that kept you invested. But that discomfort is temporary. It is part of recalibrating your sense of reality. Emotional detachment from manipulation requires new patterns of thinking. It requires deliberate reflection. It requires accurate observation. Reclaiming authority over your life means deciding that timelines without commitment are no longer acceptable. It means you no longer allow promises to override behavior. It means you evaluate people based on what they deliver, not what they describe. This is not an emotional process. It is a psychological one. The recovery comes from rebuilding your internal system of assessment. It is built on facts, on repeated patterns, on accountability. Once this new frame is in place, the manipulative cycle loses influence. The future faking no longer feels convincing. It becomes recognizable. And once recognized, it no longer holds the same emotional power. You are not waiting for clarity anymore. You are using it. You are not asking for answers anymore. You are seeing them. This is the beginning of long-term recovery from emotional control. The goal is not just to avoid being manipulated again. The goal is to re-establish a standard that prevents manipulation from being effective. The damage of future faking is not always visible. It often does not leave physical marks or public confrontation. It works in private, in the background of a relationship or a system. Its impact is measured over time, not in single events. And for many, the consequences are lasting. The cost begins with trust. When someone builds a future with you in words but not in action, it creates confusion in your ability to trust your own perception. You begin to question your standards. You start to adjust your expectations, and eventually you lose confidence in what you see. even when the signs are clear. Future faking reshapes your behavior. You start to delay your decisions. You wait longer than necessary. You remain committed to something that shows no evidence of growth. Your daily life becomes influenced by a vision that is always ahead of you, but never within reach. That state of emotional suspension affects your health, your work, your relationships with others, and your sense of purpose. Psychologically, this kind of manipulation causes long-term effects. When the brain is kept in cycles of reward and withdrawal, it adapts by lowering resistance. Over time, emotional fatigue sets in. You begin to accept less than what you need. You begin to redefine dysfunction as loyalty. Cognitive dissonance plays a large role in this stage. You are holding two opposing truths. One, that the person made you feel seen. Two, that the person consistently failed to follow through. That tension does not resolve on its own. Without conscious recognition, the mind often protects the dream and rejects the facts. The dream feels safer, but the facts remain. Philosophically, this creates a split between reality and meaning. You are living in one, while still emotionally attached to the other. This division prevents growth. It prevents clarity. It keeps you in the loop. The longer the illusion remains, the more you lose. You may lose time. You may lose emotional safety. You may lose years of opportunity, but the most significant loss is often your ability to trust yourself. That is what the manipulation takes from you. Not just the relationship, but the internal structure you use to understand the world. There is a moment when the illusion no longer works, when the future that was promised begins to sound familiar, and the delays begin to repeat. In that moment, you do not need more answers. You need recognition. You need to name what has happened. It was not a misunderstanding. It was not about effort. It was a tactic designed to hold your attention while avoiding accountability. This recognition is not easy. It requires stepping away from the emotion and looking at the pattern. It requires separating what you wanted from what was real. It requires accepting that the connection was built on an idea, not on action. That acceptance opens a door. You do not need to confront the person who used the tactic. You do not need to explain your decisions to anyone. What you need is to step out of the structure they built, to stop referencing the future they described, to stop basing your value on whether someone delivers on a dream. This is how recovery begins, not with a dramatic ending, but with a decision to stop participating in something that does not change. It is not about being stronger. It is about being informed. Future faking only works when you respond to the promise. When the promise no longer influences your behavior, the tactic stops working. That is where your attention belongs now. Not on the one who faked the future, but on your own ability to choose what comes next. If this content has helped you recognize something about your past or present situation, you can share it with someone who may need the same clarity. You can support this work by subscribing, so that future content continues to reveal more about these hidden dynamics. If someone you care about is still living inside a false dream, you may be the person who helps them see it. There are more psychological patterns that continue from this point forward. Some are even harder to detect, but they are real, and they are shaping lives silently.